and welcome to Stay for Dinner, a podcast of cooking, curiosity, and conversation. If you love cooking, hate cooking, have no idea how you even feel about it because you've never tried it before, congratulations, you are in the right place. I am your host. I'm DC Pierson. I am a comedian, an author, an enthusiastic home cook, and today on the show I will be chatting with comedian and actor Dhruv Singh, and I will be making a easy orange salad by Emily Nunn from the Department of Salad. I believe she is a New Yorker writer of the column Table for Two, and my friend Kate Villa introduced me to this newsletter that she does called Department of Salad, and I am excited about it because I am perpetually under-saladed. I think most of us probably are, and a big part of why that is I just feel like I'm lacking in salad tools and tricks and stuff that I'm actually like excited about. That isn't just kind of like, oh, salad, right? Yeah, we should probably have that. The obligation factor versus the feeling like it's something that you're actually excited about eating. So this hopefully will be a step in the right direction, and a big part of why I'm so excited about it is this is this issue of the newsletter that I'm working from is all about citrus salads, and citrus is so good always in the winter. I have found that to be the case for the past. I mean, it's just a thing that's true. It's not something that I discovered, but it's something that I've become aware of in the past few years and really like to kind of lean into in the winter months, even when the holidays are all over and everything. It's still sort of like, wait, what's good about it still being winter? Oh, the citrus. The citrus is awesome. And so this is leveraging that, and it has been really good. I literally had a grapefruit the other day where I turned to Haley, my wife, and I was like, that was a wild ride. And she was like, you're talking about a grapefruit. Maybe I'm understimulated. Maybe that's what's going on. But that's how I felt. I think maybe part of it was I burned my tongue on some coffee earlier. And so it was a combination of that. And then it was a really good grapefruit. And it was, my lack of drug experience is showing because I felt that the experience was frankly psychedelic. But really, first things first, here are the ingredients, the quick check of the ingredients here. 2 shallots very thinly sliced and separated into rings. Going to be doing that in a second. Raspberry vinegar or balsamic or red wine vinegar. Actually happen to have some raspberry vinegar, so I'm going to use that. 3/4 cup of olive oil, 1/4 cup of freshly squeezed OJ. Basically, she talks about in the recipe that as soon as she gets citrus this time of year, she like removes the skins and the pith and slices it up and puts it in Tupperware so she can just easily deploy it at any time. That's a great idea. I have not done that. I just have actual citrus with the skins on. But she mentions that once you do that, you'll just naturally have that amount of orange juice just lying in the bottom of the Tupperware. I'm going to have to probably squeeze that out myself. 1 tablespoon of balsamic vinegar, and she says, I've used raspberry balsamic here too. Kapow. I guess, I don't know if I have raspberry balsamic. I think I just have raspberry. I don't know. Maybe I'll use them both. We'll see. Pinch of cayenne or 1/2 teaspoon of red pepper flakes. I have red pepper flakes. And she mentions, she says it's semi-optional. I think it's basically like if you're already making something that's really spicy, you might want to leave that out because you don't need something spicy on the side of something that's already spicy. 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Pepper, 4 large seedless oranges, peeled, all pith removed and cut into thin rounds, and 1 cup of pomegranate seeds. Cool. First things first, because it's going to take a second to work its way into the quick pickling liquid. I am going to slice some rings of shallot. All right, got the shallot sliced up. Going to separate it into rings, individual rings, into a bowl, and then pour the raspberry vinegar over top. Oh yeah, that's definitely, okay, now I know it's raspberry balsamic because I looked and it says raspberry balsamic. So I don't know if this is different. Maybe it's intending me to use just regular raspberry vinegar and then raspberry balsamic in the other. I don't know. It's a good question. But this is what we're doing, and I think it'll probably be fine. I'm actually not a huge balsamic fan always. It's very situational. And it's not like sitting in a pool of vinegar. It's just like covered in it and I'm tossing it in. It seems like a lot of vinegar otherwise. And maybe that's wrong. There's a lot of questions. The salad is raising questions. And next up, I'm going to slice the oranges into thin rings. I'm cutting off the skin just with a straight up knife, not like a peeler. And I'm going to try to get all the pith off, the pith being the white part on the outside between the skin and the fruit. See how that goes. And I have some blood oranges and some cara cara oranges. All right, got the skin off, the pith off, 95%. And then I'm going to slice it into rings. Oh, and I don't know if I mentioned with the shallots, it says to let them sit about an hour while you make the rest of your dinner. This is all I'm making right now, so, but I am letting them sit for an hour before I use them, and I'll just see how long it takes to do the rest of this. I doubt it's going to be an hour. Oh man, this is the problem. I just want to eat all of this right now. It looks so great. And now I'm cutting the skin off of another orange, and I'm doing a way worse job of it. It's a bigger one. The pith cutting is going to be a little bit more of a to-do on this one. All right, got the skin off that one, and now I'm slicing it up. And then I have a pomegranate to yield my pomegranate seeds. So I'm going to cut that open and hit it on the back of one half into a bowl, and that gets the seeds out. I'm going to hit it with a spoon. And then finally, while I have the knife and cutting board out, it doesn't call for it, but she mentions, and this is something that definitely had experiences with before, just, you know, how great fennel is with a citrus, in a citrus salad. So I ultimately decided, I saw it and I grabbed some fennel. And so we're going to, just gonna slice a little bit of that thinly to put on top. Not directly in the recipe, but that's kind of part of the fun of what we're doing, is just freestyling with what looks good. And I forgot to kind of cut the core out of the fennel, so having a little trouble slicing it and getting it to come apart. So that's what I'm trying to do right now. Separate it and make up for that. And I did kind of a crappy job of slicing the fennel. Should have got my mandolin out. That would have been a useful thing. It's a little irregular looking, ultimately, and a little thicker than I would like. It kind of like some thin slices, but that's okay. I might use it somewhat sparingly. But it smells really good. It has that super licoricey smell. And then I'm going to, in a jar, make the dressing with 3/4 of a cup of olive oil, 1.5 tablespoons of molasses, which I actually do have a little bit of blackstrap molasses. Exciting to have an excuse to use that. And then, since I don't have a Tupperware with a little bit of orange juice hanging out in it, I am going to basically use the little like edges of orange peel that I cut off with my knife. A lot of them have a little bit of orange flesh that came away with it, so I'm kind of squeezing those into the jar to get my orange juice allotment, 1/4 cup. A little bit more of that vinegar, the chili flake. And I'm gonna have kind of a little bit of a heavy hand with that. Just my preference. Half a teaspoon of salt. And the pepper. And then taking and screwing the jar lid on, and it says if you're using actual molasses, I think you can use maple syrup as well, but if you're using actual molasses, it takes a while to emulsify, so you want to really keep shaking to get it incorporated, and that's what I plan to do. Yeah, you can still tell it's like big dots in there. Okay, there we go. Now it's getting pretty well incorporated. I actually might do a little more oil. I think I kind of threw off the balance a little bit. Maybe didn't use enough oil initially, but it's okay. Put in a little more oil and get it. I just want it there to be enough to dress the salad. But for the most part, it's looking good. Nicely incorporated, dark, mixed up. And I think that's all the prep. Then it says when you're ready to serve your salad, divide the orange slices artistically among 4 salad plates or 1 large platter, top with the pickled shallots and sprinkle prettily with the pomegranate seeds, drizzle with some of the dressing, and then finish with the flaky sea salt. And I've ultimately decided I'm just really liking how the citrus and everything is looking, and the pomegranate seeds and the pickled shallots, and I'm gonna keep this for dinner. I'm not gonna lay this out right now. I'm gonna hold on to this, and that will be our winter dinner weeknight little special thing. And so I'm gonna put this stuff away in the fridge and use it for later, and just know that it's there. And in the meantime, please enjoy. I really loved talking to Dhruv. I think he's a super funny guy, and this conversation was really nice and vulnerable, and just like open kind of conversation of, you know, where we're at, where a lot of people are at, I think, right now. And I thought it was something special. So take a listen, and I hope you'll enjoy. Well, Dhruv Singh, thank you so much for joining me. If this were a different time, we could be sharing a meal in the same space, but since it is not that time, all I can do is hope that whatever you ate last was both delicious and satisfying.
Thank you. What a wonderful blessing. And I agree. What a beautiful science fiction idea that would be right now. Sharing a meal. Oh, can't wait.
Yeah, it's it's wild that would be if we were to just do that, it would be like a thing that people that we know would be like, why did you do that? What's wrong with you? You know what I mean? Isn't that bizarre?
That is. You would be socially shamed for one of the most, I don't know, one of the oldest things that humans did together.
And I get it, but it's still sort of like, I don't know, there's definitely, it can cause a lot of cognitive dissonance when you think about that, and you go like, oh yeah, I wouldn't do that. And then you go like, oh yeah, but also it's weirdly, I don't know, it just is strange in that I think that's one of the things that makes this time so kind of exhausting, is just trying to keep track of all of the things that would otherwise be completely normal, that your brain is just like whack-a-moling, like, nope, not that. Nope, not that. Okay. Yep. You know what does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. And it's like, it also seems like there's like a rolling change of acceptability and not. Like for a while, haircuts weren't, but then some people were clearly getting great haircuts. You know what I mean? And I felt like I was behind the times. I was like, I'm walking around like fucking Shaggy from Scooby-Doo. And so I wish that there's no like consensus answer at any moment. where you're just told this is now what we're all doing. And I kind of wish there was.
Right. Yeah. And I feel like there hasn't been any amount of, I mean, I don't, it's almost cliche to say this at this point, but there's no like, I feel like in any sane world, it would have been like there was just constant, it almost sounds dystopian, but in a weird way, it's just like giant billboards being like, do this, don't do that, But instead, I feel like at the beginning, there was just like a couple of commercials that were like, stay apart to stay together. Anyway,
Yep.
bye. Or, like just completely meaningless things that aren't actually like practical advice. And
Yep.
everybody, for the most part, like I would say like the average person who isn't a complete kook who thinks it's real is still just like, well, I think as long as everyone's like 6 feet apart, I can do literally anything.
Yep.
And you just want to be like, no, but also you can't really blame people because there's no sort of, it's like, oh, how do I feel like I know all the things that I know about it? Oh, by like incessantly refreshing the same 6 Twitter feeds in an absolute panic, being like, what am I supposed to do? What's happening? Whatever, and that's exhausting. That's no way to live either.
It really is exhausting. I know. How are you holding up in general?
I'm okay. I mean, I think it definitely. I don't know how you're feeling, but I would say that I've definitely seen a lot of people, but again, this is anecdotal, but people on social media and people who I know and am in actual contact with being like, yeah, it's just really hard to sort of like get going again in the new year, whatever that means, because it feels like the new year is supposed to be some sort of like break or mental refresh or whatever. And then everybody just realizing like, oh, it's the same shit, if not potentially worse, or if things are getting better in some ways, they're getting worse in other ways. And just kind of feeling like I can't mentally get myself back in a place of, or, it's not that I completely can't, but just that it takes a lot of effort to stay focused and to sort of like do forward looking things that would potentially sort of like come to fruition in a world that wasn't completely insane. And it's sort of hard to, it's tough when literally everything you do, you're like, well, assuming society still exists in 6 months,
Yeah.
this will
Totally.
be a thing.
Completely. It's
What
not
about
like
you?
earlier when you set goals and stuff, there was at least the variable was just you getting the goal or not. Now there's this whole other variable of like, is the world going to be open enough to actually accomplish this goal in some way? There's a whole other. It's like where you're building a castle on quicksand, and it's just like I don't know if the sand's going to settle or not. Yeah, I'm doing all right. I mean, it's been a roller coaster for sure. I've had the unique-ish experience of having both sides of the quarantine thing, where I was living with someone for several months of it, and then went through a breakup like 3 months ago or something. So I've had this like I super empathize now with all my single friends who've been single through the pandemic, because oh my god, it is like chalk and cheese the difference.
Oh,
Uh,
really?
oh my god, what a fucking I don't recommend. If anyone is thinking of breaking up now during a pandemic, I don't recommend it. Just like stick it out. It's nice to have someone to eat tacos with or whatever when you get home.
How have you been? What has acclimating to that been like?
It's been okay. It's been tricky, obviously. It's a lot of hanging with a small pot of friends when I can. Just doing one-on-one kind of a lot of hikes, I guess. That's a nice outdoor thing to do. So I guess I'm healthier because of it. Initially, definitely a lot of red wine was involved. I'm not going to say it's all healthy.
Were you a big, like, have you always been a big sort of like LA like hiking person?
No, not always. I enjoy a good hike. I definitely do, but I'm not one of those people who's, always strapping up and going up there, but more so now. I do. I love. I mean, one thing that I appreciate about living in LA is how outdoorsy you can be at a moment's notice. But I haven't always taken advantage of it. No.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way where like I feel like especially when I first moved to LA, there would always be this sort of like looming promise / threat of a hike. Like people would always kind of be like, oh yeah, we should we should like go for a hike sometime or something. And just kind of always being like, I don't know what I think also too, it didn't help that I didn't really have context for like what that meant exactly. And now in sort of in retrospect being like, oh yeah, you're walking. It's just walking. Like there's something about I just, for whatever reason, the word hike, I had like a backpack in my head or something,
Yeah.
you know?
Yes, you're right. Because a city hike is not the same as that. Yeah, I know what you mean. The word hike definitely does not always mean that. Like I technically had a hike with a buddy yesterday, but we kind of just walked up Canyon Boulevard or whatever it's Canyon Avenue. Like we just walked up a street, Canyon Drive. That's what it is. We did, but we called it a hike. But really, we just walked in a city. So it's subjective. The word.
I did have I think literally like on Canyon, like I remember I had an apartment near there, and like when I first moved to the apartment was like the day that I fully had like moved in. My roommate was already kind of settled in, but I had been out of town. And the day that I moved in, I was like, I'm going to like get up tomorrow and I'm going to like be up in the hills and I'm going to be hiking around and it's going to be so LA and it's going to be great. And I like did it that next morning. I feel like I like didn't even have my bed over there yet. I was just like on the floor in a sleeping bag, just being like, tomorrow early, I'm doing a hike. I'm just going to go for it. And I did do it and it was great. And then like never did it again. Like it just didn't, that version of myself, I had that amount of energy to be that version of myself. And that was it. And then it was just complete reversion to the mean.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, that's what life's about, right? You got to say yes to stuff, see what sticks. And if not, move on.
Precisely. But it is great. And it is like, it's cool. It's neat that it's there, and it's sort of like, oh, you're in nature, and then you turn around and like there's the Hollywood sign, and I don't know. It is neat that is available. I never quite became the person, and maybe this will change, but like the person that was in that rhythm of like back when also it was like there was just more sort of like normal things you could do in the world of like gonna go like on a hike early on a Sunday and then like get brunch, all of which, to be honest with you, in this moment, I would trade it all for just a version of the world where that was even available.
Oh my God. Yes.
All the shit that we now completely take for granted. I'm sorry that we've started in such a completely depressed, like desiccated early 2021, just sort of like, oh, a mimosa? Are you kidding me? Kind of place.
I hope when people listen to the probably slew of new podcasts and like all the podcast material that's come out of this pandemic, which has to happen. I hope it all looks like a historical artifact at some point when it's like, wow, this was like a post-apocalyptic, like all the discussions had to talk about it. You know what I mean? We all had to mention the pandemic.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Or we had to like have a big caveat of sort of like,
yes.
Oh, the story that I'm telling, it took place back when I could do stuff like this. I'm not some insane person that is doing stuff like this. This is also a weird pivot, but I'm just realizing it's something that's been happening to me a lot. And I'm wondering if it happens to you as well. Do you have a lot of dreams about like performing on stage right now?
Yes. Oh my God. 100%. Like a live audience is a sexual fetish for me now. I think about being in front of an audience all the time.
Me too. Yeah. I just have like constant, it's so, and sometimes it's like, cause I would have, even before the pandemic, I would have like performing like anxiety dreams. Sometimes it would be like, oh, I'm just doing like an improv show and it's really bad. And then other times I would have like, back in high school, I'm doing like a high school play style dreams. And I'm realizing that now I'm having dreams that are just like, I'm performing and it's just going great. And it's just like, my brain is just sort of like, oh, cause you can't do this right now. So here's just like, you just get to just like play in this world mentally for a minute because it's so currently outside of your experience.
Yep. That's you're literally describing my subconscious right now.
And it was and it makes you be like, oh shit, I was having this thought yesterday. I was listening to somebody else's podcast and they were talking about like actual like theater. They were referring to like theater in terms of sort of like, doing like actual plays for people and stuff.
Uh-huh.
And I realized I was like, oh shit, I used to do theater all the time. I was doing theater. I like never fully appreciated on that level, but just being like, I used to perform for a live audience, a piece of like content, like not even just like stand up or something, but like an ensemble piece of content every week. That was theater. Holy shit. I was doing theater all that whole time.
Yeah. And it's an art form that is currently almost non-existent.
Isn't that weird?
That's strange. Yeah. It's just...
But I would love to know, especially in the context of, where you find yourself, and maybe this has shifted somewhat as you've gone from the interrelationship quarantine lifestyle to the single quarantine lifestyle, where home cooking does or does not fit into your life at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely changed in the sense of it's ramped up some more, from let's see. I've done a lot more cooking the last few weeks for sure than I have before. I don't cook every meal. I definitely do some takeout and stuff. But while in a relationship, there's a lot more of that because there's a lot more, at least for the way we were, there's a lot more you're at home. Let's get a nice dinner going because it's Friday night or something. So we feel like there's a weekend happening. Now there's not really... when you order out, ordering for one person is kind of you're not going to get a smorgasbord of different options and stuff. I also have become one of those insufferable people who bought an air fryer and now wants to talk about it all the time. But that's...
I mean, tell me about it, because we've had other air fryer lifestyle evangelists on the show, and part of me is like enticed by it, and then the other part of me is still like, wait, how is it not just a small convection oven? You know what I mean? Like I'm still like,
it's just marketing. It's fully just an old ass convection oven that we've had for decades, but it's souped up and marketed differently. That's about it. I mean, I think if you have a convection oven, you have an air fryer. You just, I don't know. It does. You know what it is? It's a convection oven, but they just give you a bunch of different trays to put in it. Like a bunch
of... I mean, that's not nothing. So what kind of trays? What have you been putting in the trays? What's getting air fried so far?
Yeah, well, I've been doing French fries. Those come out pretty nice in an air fryer with a lot less oil. You coat it with a little bit of oil, but it feels healthier for you. I've been doing like chicken breast, breaded chicken breast, sometimes healthy, sometimes like breaded, sometimes not breaded. Been doing some burgers, which actually come out pretty well. Because I don't have a grill. I mean, I have, I can do it on a stovetop, but I feel like they come out better than the stovetop when you air fry them. And the main thing with it is how convenient it is, because you just stick it in, flip it once in the middle, and it comes out pretty good.
Where does like the grease and stuff go?
There's a little thing to catch it to where it drips down. I've been doing a bit of I don't know if it's a cheat, and I think it probably does change the cooking a little bit, so it's not perfect, but I've been laying down like a sheet of tin foil underneath not under the basket, so the basket is still open so it can air fry on all sides, but at the bottom of the fryer, I put down a thing of tin foil to just catch any grease and fat. Some of it does kind of splatter around the air fryer though, so they do have to be cleaned more than I think a regular oven does.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be any form of frying if it didn't like make a little bit of a mess around. I'm glad that that's still a component of it.
That's still a component. Yeah. Unfortunately, one of the shames of the air fryer evangelist community, we have to admit, still some grease flying.
And I'm glad that I could use this forum to sort of like, just drag that out into the light,
Yeah, I guess so. I guess it's something we have to deal with square in the face. So you have used a convectional, or you have a convection oven?
I do not. No, I don't. I don't have a convection oven. I think of it as being something that like parents have. Like my my wife's parents have at their house have a convection option on their oven. My stepmom at her house has the convection option. So it is nice whenever we're home to be able to be like, this thing that normally takes a long time, I'm going to get the oven up to temperature in like 30 seconds and it's going to be great. Like I barely ever use it when food's actually in there. I think I just use it to get the oven hot faster and then I turn it off. And for people that don't know what we're talking about, because it's kind of, I don't know, it's not like, there's a bunch of different terms for it, but basically I think just air frying or convection ovening just means like there's a fan that blows the heat around instead of just the heat sort of being static. Like the hot air is supposed to like get all in and around the food. But yeah, no, I've never had it in an oven of my own. So an air fryer is, that's again, it's a gateway to convection ovening, I feel like is the option that it presents for me. And also it just sounds great. Again, marketing. It just sounds like, frying, which everybody loves, but with air, which everybody is like, that's gotta be better than a ton of oil. And also just like, even if there is a little bit of oil on the French fries, I feel like the fact that you're not using like, anytime you deep fry something, it just takes so much oil. Like every time I've ever like made like French fries at home or something, I'm always like, okay, I got like one thing of vegetable oil from Trader Joe's. Surely that will be enough. And it never is. It always takes like 2.5.
Yep. Yeah. Earlier last year for my now ex-girlfriend's like birthday, I was doing this thing where I made different things for 10 days leading up to her birthday. And one of the days I decided to make a fried chicken like sandwich because that's something we always enjoyed together. Oh my fuck! I bought so much oil and I used it all. I used like 2 huge bottles of oil and it still wasn't enough. And it came out great, but it really was a reminder that when you eat fried stuff, even from a restaurant or whatever, it's just like, I don't know, you're swallowing 2 bottles of oil.
Oh yeah. I've even heard that as like, I remember reading an article about like, they were basically just like fried chicken, like KFC, Popeyes, places like that, like those kind of fast food places. They were like, why are they so much better than just like your average like fast food experience? Like, why is the fried chicken that you get at KFC just like genuinely, it is just like some of the best fried chicken commercially available, which you would think shouldn't be the case. But it was basically just like, if you're a restaurant, you're either like doing fried chicken all the time, or the amount of space and effort and resources that you have to devote to being like, okay, we're doing it like one night a week, or we're having fried chicken night like one night a month or whatever, is just so much effort and so much like oil and just like logistics that they're never going to be as good as a place that's as a place that's like doing it all the time.
Yep. 100%.
And that is always how it's felt anytime I've ever deep fried something. Sorry, you were saying?
No. I was just saying one of my favorite dishes in general, and something that, speaking of home cooking, I'm planning to make soon, maybe in the air fryer so it's healthier, is Korean fried chicken. Have you ever had Korean fried chicken?
Back when I lived through New York, my friends and I kind of went through a huge like Korean fried chicken phase, because there was this place called Bonchon, and it was really some of the first like Korean food I'd ever had. So please, you're in good company. Tell me about your Korean fried chicken arc, because I could talk about it all fucking day.
Sure. I mean, I love Bonchon, first of all. I obviously LA has like an incredible Koreatown because it's just it's expansive and there's a ton of options and stuff. And I got into it a bit here, but a couple of years ago, I was so I grew up in Bombay in India, and I frequently go back to visit family and stuff. And I was flying, the best airline deal that year was to fly via Seoul through Korean Air. So, and I'd never been to Seoul before, so I thought, all right, I'm going to take a stopover and stay there for like 3 days en route, because I have a friend there. And so I went there, and he took me out for like fried chicken and beer over there as like the, a standard evening out. And it was so incredible. And he kind of talked to me about the history of it a little bit, which also, I love kind of the history of food dishes sometimes. Sure. I feel like it tastes better when you know.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And apparently, and I'm sorry if I'm sort of mansplaining this when you already know this, but when American GIs were over there for the Korean War in the 50s, I think was when that was. They brought fried chicken over because that's what they wanted to eat. And after they left, Koreans liked fried chicken so much, but they preferred it with their own herbs and spices and stuff in the batter. And so that's how that unique like Korean fried chicken flavor came out, or dipping them in soy sauce and soaking them in garlic sauce and stuff like that. And since then, it's just been this like I don't know. The first time I tried, there's a place here called Jesse Boy on like Santa Monica, and it's so fucking good. It's like the Korean fried chicken, something about like Asian flavors, but with like a Southern American dish is the just it's a match made in heaven. I love that shit.
Oh yeah, it's the greatest. And my one of my favorite things that I've learned about it is that I guess in Korea it's like it's almost a I'm not even I'm trying to come up with like what the American equivalent would be, but basically it's like a known thing that you can do to be like, okay, you like went to college and you kind of didn't really figure anything out and you're kind of a slacker. So like, you know what, you and your buddies are just going to like open a fried chicken place. Like that's like, it's almost like what like taking improv classes in
Yeah.
America is or something. Like it's very just sort of like I'm kicking around after college. I never really quite figured out what I want to do. So this kind of seems interesting. I'm just going to start a fried chicken restaurant with me and like 3 of my loser drinking friends. It's so, and like I love that. I love that so much. And that I don't know. It's almost kind of like I guess the best actual like equivalent I could think of is like sometimes when you would have like a like college town like sandwich shop or something, but I don't even know if that's right. I don't know what the equivalent would be.
Yeah, comparing it to improv classes, I think is a very good analogy. You and your
But that
loser
just I
friends.
don't know, that just the concept that would be like and it should be like back when we get the world together again, like we should just be like, you know what we're all going to do tonight is we're just going to go eat fried chicken and drink beer. I guess it's a thing that people were doing, but we would never just say like that is what we're going to go do, like that as a discrete and explicit activity that's going to take up a whole evening, and god damn it, it should be.
It should be. It's such a good one.
So where else did you guys go in Seoul? Did you have any other
Um,
experiences that stick out to you?
well, the like party life there is unbelievable. People on the weekends anyway. People party till like 6, 7 in the morning. Just the streets are packed. Not obviously. Again, we got to clarify. This was pre in the before times, but it was yeah, it was wild. The interesting thing about I went to like also there's an old market. I can't remember the name, but there's when I say old, I mean 2,000 years old or something, and it's been open for those 2,000 years, and it's like it's an in half indoors, half outdoor market where it's just a bunch of food stalls all along making traditional Korean food. So it's like the rice cakes. I'm going to butcher the names if I try and say them in Korean, so I'll just say the translations. But like rice cakes and uh, pork and fish and all this stuff that you just sit down at a stall. It's dirt cheap, and there's like steaming pots of noodles everywhere and loud.
Oh,
It was amazing. Um, yeah, the interesting thing about Seoul too is it's a very Korea relative to other Asian countries too is a pretty hermetic country in that there's not a lot of tourism. So there's not a lot of an attempt to reach out to tourists. So there's not a lot. The vast majority of people do not speak English, though a lot of them are learning and have are to be in the sort of global economy and stuff. But there's not like signs everywhere in English. It's not even like Japan where you can probably easily find like tourist information and stuff. And so that was kind of cool about it, where because I knew I had a Korean friend to show me around, that I felt like I got to see a very different side than if I just gone solo.
right. So, like, almost ironically, it seems like what you're saying is because there's less of an effort to cater to tourists, it's almost better to be a tourist of a certain bent if you're really trying to get like what is something close to or as close to a sort of authentic experience of this, whatever that means, is sort of a loaded
Yeah,
phrase, but like as I can get.
absolutely. Though again, it's one. It's dependent on. I think it just like any going anywhere in the world. It's so much better when you know someone who's local to that place.
Oh man. that rules. How bad. Again, not to bring it back to the pandemic, but
Yes.
Haley and I are watching. We're super into like all the like 90 Day Fiance franchise, and there's a version of it called 90 Day Fiance the other way, where it's like, okay, these are people who are going to Americans who are going to other countries and then like marrying people there. And there is a couple where it's a woman from Utah and she is marrying a South Korean guy in South Korea. And at the beginning of this season, because it like premiered after the pandemic started, they had kind of a like cold open thing where it's like it's like her and she's like in South Korea and she's like, oh my God, you guys, the coronavirus pandemic is hitting. And she's like filming it herself, like these images that we've now seen almost become like cliche. She's like wearing a mask and she's like, everything's on lockdown. It's so crazy. The streets are empty. And then watching it at the time going like you felt like their intention was to be like, oh my God, she was experiencing COVID before anyone in America. How crazy is that? Oh my God. Like she had no idea what she was in for. But even then, I feel like when we were watching it in like June or July, just knowing how relatively completely under control South Korea had things by that point, and just being like, Davon, stay there, never come back. It's the best. You just hit the jackpot. You have no idea, like just this sort of idea of like, oh my God, this is so crazy and it's so whatever, but it's like, no. It'll be like by this time next year, literally all of the things that Dhruv is describing will be completely open in South Korea and it will just be like fine.
Yeah. That's it's alarming how each month of the last year had a different flavor, of like what was happening in March was so distinct than what was happening in June, and like our mindsets and stuff about the whole thing.
It did, didn't it? Yeah, that's wow. Yeah. Like it's going to be something, I think you're right, that when we look back on this time, it will be easy to kind of lump it all together. Like it'll just kind of run together and seem like, okay, this is the sort of the cliches of what that experience were like. And we're going to lose, which is maybe for the best for those of us that actually went through it. And again, I'm saying like this from a complete position of privilege. I have not had to like go to work in an environment where I'm exposed to it. Really. I have not had to, you know what I mean? Like I'm saying this as somebody that's had probably in the 99.5th percentile of a complete cakewalk of an experience relative to all of this. But like what those little micro gradations of the sort of like the mood, the information, where we are in terms of getting it under control, how we're seeming to do, like the period of time where it's like everybody's mad at everybody for going to the beaches, and then a month later it was like, wait, I wish we could go to the beaches, it was the only safe thing to do, like we're gonna lose all that. You're totally right. There has been a lot of there has been a lot of that.
Yeah. I mean, do you want to look back on it? Do you think you'd want to look back on this shit like 10 years from now, assuming it all kind of blows over in a good way?
I don't know. That's a really good question. I mean, I like at the beginning of it, my stepmom was like, "Oh, you should write, like you should like I'm telling this to you and all your siblings. You should like keep a journal because your kids will be so interested in like what was it like?" And it was so, and so I kind of started doing that a little bit, like for like once every like 3 days at the beginning, I'd be like, okay, went outside again. There's nobody outside, but it was nice out anyway. Like there wasn't like, and then it was in classic fashion of like just any time I've ever tried to regularly keep a journal in my life, for the most part, of like, you do it for like 2 days and then it's a week later and then you're writing like, sorry, I haven't written here in a while. And then I just completely fell off of it. It was like 3 entries, then 1 entry a week later, then 1 entry like 2 months later, being like, well, everything's completely different now. But like that's been about it. Like I would almost, it would be comical to kind of like have another entry at this point, given how much things have changed, and then weirdly how much they haven't changed. What about you? Is it something that you think you will, like you said, want to revisit?
I mean, what you just said is an interesting point about, your kids might want to be interested in what your inner mind state and what was happening at this time. Though, like you said, also it'd be strange to give him a diary, and they're like, "Why did you give me a bunch of apologies to yourself for not writing?"
Yes,
I don't want to
exactly.
fucking
It
read.
seems like this is more about you. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I don't want to read this shit. I mean, one thing I will say is I see this slew of kind of uh, pandemic movies coming out at some point, and some of them are already in the works. These quarantine things, or these either things filmed over Zoom and stuff, or just about this time. And I, at least for a while, will have no interest in reliving that shit. Like, I don't want to, I don't know. I don't. I guess I'm trying to think about it. I mean, there's parts of it that are so deeply interesting that I do want to keep alive and remember. For example, there was that whole sort of nature healing itself week
Sure.
in April before when
Sure.
stuff shut down and cars weren't on the road and like deer were frolicking on freeways and places and shit like that. That was very fascinating because I'd never had a visceral experience of stepping out and looking at the sky and being like, oh, that looks like a Renaissance painting. It's so clear and there's pinks and
Yeah.
purples that I've never seen before. And it did make me go, oh, Renaissance paintings look that way because that's what the sky looked like all the time.
Wow.
Because humans weren't like pumping smoke into the atmosphere,
Yeah.
pre-industrial revolution. So that stuff like that, I want to just like remember how, I don't know how deeply stuff like that affected me, because it's easy to forget that. But other than that, it's been such a shitty year on a personal level for me in different ways that I don't especially want to remember that.
Yeah, that makes
I
sense.
don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And I can only imagine that probably contributes to the feeling of like, let's get fucking past this. You know what I mean? Like, let's.
Yeah.
You know?
Because also, if I'm being honest about if I was to talk to kids honestly about my quarantine experience, I'd be like, well, so, there was a breakup. And again, it was as amicable as could be, but it still sucked. Developed a pretty steady whiskey habit for a few months. What else? Smoked a heroic, like, Hiroshima quantity of weed all the time. Like that. These are the things, if I'm being honest about it, they're not like global world-changing things. Also, I mean, of course, I've had family members affected by COVID and stuff, and that's an important thing to mention. But on a day-to-day, the real shit is much more pathetic than that.
Right. Yeah, I had. Yeah, it is weird to sort of like to track that and to be like, yeah, what am I doing? What is the global, and this is something that I genuinely like struggle with a lot and this is like a big thing that like comes up in like therapy all the time and whatever, is sort of like, how is your, and again, this is also literally what I'm about to describe is like, is very like, is privilege basically, but like, how is the external sort of like reality or of the world compared to like your internal state? And it's like a lot of times when you're like worried about stuff, and that can be like world events, or it could be just like things in your life that you're worried about but haven't actually like happened yet necessarily, and might not happen, or anywhere in between, versus just the reality of like, and if this is true for you in a given moment of like, I'm okay, I'm inside, I have enough to eat, I have, I have a place to sleep, like all that stuff of going like the experience of like, I'm okay versus what is happening out there, how it's affecting me, how I'm dealing with it, how I'm dealing with the idea of it, versus just the reality of sort of like, okay, but in this moment, can I get in touch with the fact that I am like, at least physically, like, okay. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yep. Totally. Man,
and sorry, I don't know how to reconcile those two things.
No. I didn't mean to take us down such a dark and introspective path with my answer either.
No, but it's that. But I mean, that's where we're at, and that's kind of, I don't know. I sometimes I feel, I'm always of two minds when I'm doing this podcast, because I feel like there will be times where I kind of want to go like, but this is just supposed to be the fun home cooking podcast where I just go and I make a thing and then I talk to a friend and we talk about French fries, or whatever. And it is that. And I want that to be a place for people. And it is that for me as well. But then also it's just like, but this is like what's happening, right? So it's not super realistic to keep it out of that realm. And then also I have to, acknowledge that also it's like people are listening to this at probably a lot of, this is a big reason that I listen to podcasts right now is like, because they just want to experience a conversation with other people in a way. And it's just kind of nice to have that. And it's nice to have access to, different voices than you're not getting as much of that in your everyday life right now, probably. So I don't know. It just, all that to say, like, that's cool. I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's just where we're at. But I would love to know from you, like, who did you see cooking around you growing up?
Well, my mom is a food writer. Well, when I was growing up, she was in the tax department and then like quit her job kind of cold turkey to write about food and stuff. So she's always been into it. She would cook, but not all the time. But so definitely her.
When you say a food writer, like restaurant critic or like in writing recipes, or in what, what form did that take?
Yeah, restaurant critic. She also, I guess, in different ways writes about food. But yeah, restaurants, kind of travel and stuff like that. Some of that's gone down over the last year, obviously. But yeah, I guess mainly restaurants is when I was growing up, anyway.
And do you feel like that influenced your relationship to food, or like how you guys experienced it in the home growing up? Like, was there an awareness like, oh, well, this is kind of mom's job?
Yeah, I think so. Just the fact that she is kind of a foodie. I think, when you're a kid, you don't always have access to the idea of like, oh, food has a lot more variety than just the 4 meals that we eat at home, or you know what I mean, just the standard rotation of them. So I think that did inform it. Gave me a bit of a kind of wider palate in some way. Growing up in India, obviously I ate a lot of Indian food, and a lot of the standard meal was chapati, which is like an Indian bread, kind of like a variation of a roti or a type of roti, and a lot of like, what am I thinking? Like Indian vegetables, bhindi, stuff like that, and sometimes chicken or fish. Because Bombay is also, it's an island city, a coastal city, so there's a lot of fresh seafood. So that's kind of what I feel like that was a standard meal. If I'm trying to pick the thing that I ate most commonly, it would be something like that. But from a young age, I think I never did a lot of cooking, but I always like to kind of dabble with food. But I made like garbage food for myself. Like I would, like, one of my recipes, quote unquote, that I thought was so delicious was taking like a huge heaping spoonful of butter and dropping it into rice and then just mixing it up and eating that. White rice and butter.
That sounds fantastic.
I invented, quote unquote, something I called an ice sandwich, which was, I don't know why I did this to myself, but it was a sandwich with white bread and a fried egg and then some grated cheese. And then a bunch of ice cubes that you'd break up, and you just kind of sprinkle a little bit of ice on top of it. And so it's like a crunchy.
Here are the things that are good about that I feel like you were hitting on, maybe without realizing it, is even though I wouldn't eat an ice sandwich today, I don't think, is texture, right? Textural variation. You're getting like the little like ice chips, in there that otherwise is a pretty soft thing. And then also temperature variation. You know what I mean? I feel like can be nice sometimes to have like a really hot thing with a really cold thing. And what's colder than ice?
I appreciate you Gordon Ramsaying my 6-year-old invention. I was basically a stoner already in the body of like an 8-year-old child.
Do you have any? This is sort of a pivot from the past, but you mentioned smoking a like heroic amount of weed during this time. Do you have any things that are just like, this is the thing that I have to have, or even if I say to myself like beforehand, I'm not gonna order this or I'm not gonna get this, I'm gonna end up eating or drinking that by the end of the night if I'm super stoned.
Well, I mean, I'll say I've tried to, now I regulate it a lot, but it was definitely for a few months, and it was 100% also directly post breakup and stuff. I'm trying to be a little more judicious with my weed use and also with eating stuff because just to get healthier.
Sure.
But I mean, fried chicken for sure. Korean fried chicken was a go-to. I think in terms of cooking and making stuff. Let me think. One thing I've tried to do is replace all my regular snacky habits with the slightly healthier variation of it that'll still hit the spot. So like just trading out like straight up potato chips for I don't know, some pop chips or something like that, or nuts or fruit or something. Just trying to slowly make those changes. But let me see. Here's one thing that I've made stoned, and I actually highly recommend it to listeners if you're looking for a unique but very easy to make meal / snack that is extremely regional. So this is a thing that was invented in Bombay. It's called eggs Kejriwal, and the reason it was invented, the lore goes back to the early 1960s. Bombay has a number of these kind of social clubs. They're almost like country clubs. There were these things. A lot of them were built by the British before, during British rule. For they were like kind of whites only clubs. And now once they left, Indians were like, nope, we are taking over, and we we run the shit now. So there's like one called the Willingdon Club in Bombay. Great, beautiful club. Golf courses and all this shit. And there was a businessman in the 60s who, in India, there's a lot of people are vegetarian for religious reasons, which also includes not eating eggs. This guy he couldn't eat eggs at home because of his family, but he loved eggs secretly. So he would go to this club and he would have them make them these eggs, and his name was something Kejriwal, and so the eggs have got his name now. And this is how you make it. You got to get some like brioche bread. You take some brioche bread or sourdough if you want. I prefer brioche. You need an egg or 2 eggs if you want, usually 1 egg. You got to get some tomatoes. You dice up the tomatoes. You throw them in a pan. You cook them with some oil. You can put a few chopped onions if you want. One thing you do need for sure is go to an Indian grocery store. If you're in LA, India Sweets and Spices is one of them. And you got to get Indian green chilies. You don't get these anywhere else than an Indian grocery store. You chop those up really fine. They're pretty spicy, but that's what makes this an Indian recipe. You throw them on top of it. You have to cook them in a cast iron pan on the stove. And then you put the bread on. You sprinkle all that on the bread. You put the egg on top. You throw some cheese as well, like grated cheese, shredded cheese, preferably like cheddar on there. And then the key is, once you put cheese on top of the egg as well, you let it cook a little bit, and you put the whole cast iron pan into the oven for like 3 minutes so that the whole thing kind of bakes around it. And it is so delicious. It's the perfect stoner snack. It's spicy, like Indian food is, but it's also pretty easy to make, and takes you like 10 minutes, maybe less. And I highly recommend it. Eggs Kejriwal.
Oh my God.
Look it up. Look it up if you need. It's Kajriwal.
Oh, that sounds tremendous. Also, just anything with a cast iron, I'm like, I'm there. It's great.
Yeah. I think the reason for the cast iron is probably just so you can stick it in the oven right after.
Sure.
Yeah.
Ooh, that sounds so good. I mean, how good are eggs?
God, the best on anything. I love them. Do you have any? Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Do you mean like, do I have like a go-to like egg preparation? Or
Yeah.
For a long time, Haley and I were pretty down the rabbit hole of doing like a real like soft scrambled egg. I feel like for a while, every like food website was like, here's how you do like the super crazy soft scramble, like, not the scrambled eggs of yore, where it's just sort of like you put them in a pan and they kind of get, they form curds, but they're very just like, they cook super rapidly, and it's in like a, you know, like that you would get at like a hotel breakfast bar that are kind of like watery or whatever they can be, but very just like you have to like methodically scrape the sides of the pan and with like a rubber spatula and just do it at a super low heat, and just like tons and tons of butter. And those are very good. I got really good, or I got pretty good at doing those. But it is like, it's a weird thing where you just kind of have to keep doing it. And anytime it's also like, it's a thing where if you're doing it, you feel like you're always on the edge. How do I put this? The feeling that it's going well is also the feeling that it might be about to tip over into absolute disaster at any time.
Okay.
And I have that feeling a lot anyway, because that's just who I am. That's just how I experience.
What do you mean exactly? So like when
basically
you're making
the problem is that you have to have it at a super low heat, right? And so it's just completely like egg soup for the longest time, and you just have it in a pan and you're just like stirring it, and it's on really low heat, so it feels like it's not cooking at all.
Right.
And then after a while, in a perfect world, like tiny curds will start to form. Like you'll notice when you look at the spatula that maybe you're just getting like the slightest bit of the eggs are changing texture and are starting to kind of like congeal, for lack of a more pleasant word. And
I got you. So it's like a split second difference between
exactly,
done and
because
not done.
then if you have the heat a little too high and you're like getting impatient or whatever, they just start like sticking to the bottom of the pan. Because that's the other thing is, and maybe this is just for pure like masochism's sake, but all of these recipes I remember that I would get into would be like, you got to do it in like, you know, not a non-stick pan, right? Like you know, we had like an ironclad like skillet where it would be like, okay, I'm doing it in this skillet, but it's not non-stick. So I'm like, just like constantly trying to get every little bit of surface area and make sure that the eggs aren't sticking. And then I guess what I mean is by tip over into like failure is then there's always a part of you that's like, wait, did I let it get too hot? And now it's going to like in a second just form like normal scrambled eggs, and all of my painstaking side scraping is going to be completely for nothing, you know, like, you're a little bit going like, I think it's starting to happen. Wait a minute. Does that mean it's about to go completely wrong?
Yes. Okay. You're on the razor's edge with this recipe.
Precisely.
Is there any like cream in it as well? Creme fraiche or whatever
I think that's it's butter. I think you could probably do creme fraiche and it would be totally fine. It might even be like a good shortcut, but I feel like a lot of the ones that I would read were just like obsessive about like, no, and like a classical French chef is going to like reach in your kitchen window and hit you over the head if you use anything but just like eggs and butter. And I don't understand why. But there was a part of me, especially at that time, that was like super appealing. I was like, I don't understand why, but I got to do it like a French person, and it's going to take a really long time. And then once it's done, I'm going to be happy. But like, there's always the chance that it's going to just be like, and this would happen too. Like you eventually just get impatient. You want to get on with your Sunday and you're just like, I guess I'm just making normal scrambled eggs with a lot of butter now.
Great. Man, this sounds, I need to try this out because I don't think I've ever made like the perfect scrambled eggs.
It is like, it's something that you can go down the rabbit hole on in a good way. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I need to, because right now a lot of my scrambled eggs, I try to make scrambled eggs every morning, or not every morning, but most mornings, you know, and a lot of them end up looking like, you know, when you go to like a cheap hotel buffet and you open up that like steel drum full of kind of just like, they're just like fat batches of just like blobs of egg. That's what mine looks like. So I need, and
that's fine. This. Like I like those too. Like that's the other thing. You know what I mean? Like there's nothing. I think that's another one thing I realized too after doing it for a while. I was like, but I also like the normal kind of scrambled eggs. So that's gonna have to be okay as well. Yeah. Especially when you're pressed for time. Like on just a normal weekday morning, I feel like it's like you don't necessarily need to make soft scrambled eggs that you're going to like sprinkle a little tarragon and sea salt on top of. Exactly, but sometimes you do. And you're like, I did something with my day, even though nothing else has happened.
Yes, totally. Man, I want to be pressed for time right now. Oh God, that'd be so
Oh
good.
my God, right?
I wish I was pressed for time.
That's what I was like. Yeah, yeah, no, exactly. I know what you mean. Just that feeling of just sort of like, oh, I gotta do this, and then I have a show later, so I gotta run to Target and pick up
Exactly.
you know what I mean? Just that feeling of just sort of like, oh my God, I got so much shit to do today.
Yep. Yep.
And that can be a very good feeling. And it was, I completely know what you mean, where I was like, oh man, I used to be like, oh, I'm so mad I have to like drive to Santa Monica to do a commercial audition. And now it's like, yeah, that would be great.
I know. Rather than just sitting, taping yourself on a Zoom call. Yeah.
And that's something in and of itself. Have you done any like, I've had some experiences of being in like Zoom waiting rooms now for doing auditions, and it is just like, it's too much. We can't be seeing into each other's lives right now. It's too,
I know.
we're all in
I
the
know.
same sort of weird, just like it's there's already a certain, I guess, well, for me, the defining commercial audition experience of my entire life was I was in a waiting room. There was like, it was at 200 South La Brea, which will be meaningful to exactly two people listening to this, and you're one of them. But like this giant waiting room where a bunch of different actors are waiting to audition for a bunch of different commercials, and so there will always be like a bunch of guys that are clearly auditioning to play Santa Claus, a bunch of guys that are clearly auditioning to play bikers, a bunch of women that are clearly auditioning to play like corporate VPs. Like you'll just see these different sort of like types and groups. And anyway, one of the groups that was happening was, it was like, okay, there's a bunch of women waiting to go into this audition. And I think there was like a woman who like had her kid, and the kid was going to go in for like a different audition. And so the kid is like kind of waiting for his, and then mom's waiting for hers. Maybe the kid wasn't going to go to audition, but anyway, it became very clear to me that it was like the kid also auditions, right? The mom is waiting for her audition, but her son who's there, who's like 5 or 6, is just like waiting for her, and she's like trying to read her lines. And the kid was just like, Mommy, why do grown-ups go to auditions?
Oh my God, that's funny.
And I was like, fuck, man, this kid is identified like there's something inherently lacking in, there's just something very silly about this whole thing. And that's part of what's great and fine about it. But I think that's very true. It's just the entire experience is very silly. And so feeling like you're actually still in your home and you're seeing into a bunch of other commercial actors' homes in this moment, and especially if there's a casting assistant who keeps popping into the Zoom to be like, everybody keep your audio on, like don't mute yourself because otherwise I can't see you or something. So it's like, now I'm seeing and hearing into all of these people's homes, and they're doing it into mine, and it's too much vulnerability.
Yes, absolutely. And it's a weird, like that's not what we all signed up for. Like people at work as well did not sign up for their home to be seen. It's a strange new boundary. I don't know. We got to figure that stuff out, I guess, as a society.
Or let's just rapidly get back to normal if we can.
Please, I know.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I had this interesting experience where, God, I hope that I'm not. It doesn't sound like I'm trying to brag, but I'm really not. But I had an experience where I auditioned for something last year, or a few months ago, and then did all the other subsequent stages of it also over Zoom, and then booked it as well, and we did all the table reads over Zoom.
Oh wow,
and that was bizarre because I never met anyone until we actually got to set, and obviously it's with all these COVID protocols, and you're getting tested several times a week, and you're all wearing masks and stuff. But all of the chemistry reads and stuff were over Zoom. So your eyes are not making contact with each other.
Right.
Because, you know what I mean? You're looking in different directions. It was a very strange experience. And something also strange about the table read was there was one actor who, she was a little bit older, maybe, and not as familiar with the technology and stuff. She, during the table read, when it wasn't her part, was going off screen and having quite a loud argument with her husband. But everyone else was still reading, and because it was on Zoom, it kept cutting back to her screen. So it would keep cutting back. People are doing their fuss, and we cut back to her, honey, I'm doing a table read, honey. And it was so uncomfortable. It's such a just such a
That's so
exemplar of this
brutal.
time.
Oh, I feel for her
Yeah,
so much. But yeah, there
I
is
know.
like, and it's
I
just
know.
again exactly. It's exactly what you said. Nobody signed up for this. We didn't.
Nobody signed up.
Nobody in the world, whatever they're doing, did not. Or most of us anyway, did not sign up for this moment. Except for the people whose neglect has made it much worse than it had to be. But that's a story for another day. But yeah, I know what you mean. Like there was one of my favorite things that I consumed during the pandemic that I actually liked, that I felt like, oh, reminds me of like why I love art and whatever, was they did this thing, WNYC did this thing with like Shakespeare in the Park, where they did, instead of, because they couldn't do Shakespeare in the Park, they did a radio play of the production of Richard II that they were going to do anyway. And so they basically said like, and they would do like these little 15-minute documentaries, and it was like in installments, like over the course of a week. And it was really neat. I would like listen to it and do dishes and feel artsy. And they said basically like, yeah, we did this whole thing basically like over Zoom, but also, we sent the actors like recording equipment. So they were recording themselves, but we were over Zoom, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And it was really funny to me because there was like all of the actors sounded great. Like they were, it was a really amazing cast, except for there was like this one actor who was maybe playing like 2 or 3 roles. And she was, like you're saying, like clearly an older actor. And she, you're just imagining this like older, like Upper East Side, like lifer New York theater person, like probably the coolest person you ever met. But like, she doesn't want to figure out how to like do a podcast essentially in her apartment. Like she's not on Earwolf. So everyone else in the cast, like their audio would sound amazing. And then every time she was speaking, it was just a little bit just like thigh on the whatever, like it was just like, it was like a little bit just had that like, oh, she's in her bathroom and it's a little echoey and this is the only place she can go in the apartment. And that was like, everyone involved was like, this is as good as it's going to get.
Yeah.
And it was so endearing.
Yeah. That's so funny to hear that afterwards, and you just know every time it cuts to her, you just it's so distinct.
Yes, exactly. Where it's just like cute. In the reality of this thing, there's one Shakespearean character who just has a little bit of like a buzz to her voice. It was delightful. Well, Dhruv, my final question for you is just, if there is one thing that either you grew up eating all the time, or you've had at a restaurant or had in your travels that you loved, and that you don't already know how to make it, but you could just snap your fingers right now and know how to make that thing perfectly every time forever, what would it be?
Wow. Oh, that's a good question. Let me think. You know what it would be, because I think they're hard to make. I would love to be able to make a like a cheese, or let's say like a souffle kind of, like a savory souffle, a camembert dariole or something fancy like that, because I think they're extremely hard to get right, because they deflate so quickly, and they have a short shelf life. You got to make them and you got to eat them within like 5 minutes of making them, because they start to sink. So something like
I've
that.
I've never even had one.
I've had one once at a very fancy restaurant in Bombay, like ages ago, and it was so good. It was mind blowing. It was so fucking good.
Oh,
But they have it's a tiny window, both as kind of like your scrambled eggs thing. The margin of error is so tiny between it being successful and not, because they're so fluffy and light. So maybe that would be mine.
oh, that sounds fantastic.
Yeah? What's yours?
Oh, that's a really good question. No one's ever turned it around on me like that.
I like that you said that's a really good question.
Wait, now wouldn't that be amazing if it was like suddenly next week it was like Dhruv presents Stay for Dinner, and it was just like, wait a minute, that's he, like it was like he deputized. That's how podcast law works. It's like a duel. It's like, okay, that's justice.
Yeah.
That's a really good question. What would it? Yeah, Oh man. I think honestly that the first thing that came to my mind was like sushi, weirdly.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like if I just knew how to like,
Yeah.
it seems like one of those things that's so incredibly simple, but it clearly requires so much skill.
Decades
Like
of work, to figure it out.
yeah, where it's like, okay, you have to be like, then you are going to apprentice to the guy that does the rice, and then you get to do the rice, and now
Have
you're
you seen,
apprenticing to the guy that does
Jiro
the
Dreams
fish.
Sushi?
Yeah, exactly. Like
God.
that I think would be it. And I think that there's, I both of our things feel like something where it's like incredibly simple. It's like finite. It only exists for like a few seconds in its perfect form. And you know, there's something about that. I like that. That's what we want for 2021 is we're hoping for like a very simple, nice thing that just is what it is and is there for a second, and that's good enough.
You know, that's beautiful. You summed that up beautifully. I wonder if that comes from us both being improvisers, that we like ephemeral things.
I think you might be right, and there is something that's great about that, because it's also like, what else, like in a weird way, like what else is there, right?
What else is there? You're right. Everything is transient. It's true.
Damn.
Wow.
Sweet.
I hope your listeners have really learned something from this.
They're going to be like, they were lying. Both of these dudes are fucking super high. They're not regulating their intake at all.
Yeah. Baked out of our minds.
Dude, Dhruv, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. Thanks for taking the time, and have a great rest of your weekend. And hopefully we actually get to be the thing that we said we wanted to be at the beginning of the podcast, in the same space.
Yes.
At some point sooner rather than later. And in the meantime,
I hope so, man. Thank you for having me. It was a real treat, and I do hope after this is over we can actually have a human meal together.
All right, that is it. That is all for this week's episode of Stay for Dinner. Thank you so much to Dhruv Singh. You can find him on Instagram at Dhruv Uday Singh, and he is on Good Trouble, on Freeform. He's all over the place, and I was glad that one of those places was here on the podcast this week. Really enjoyed that. If you like the intro music, that is by Jason Anderson. He is Jason the Band on Twitter and Instagram. That is the song July 4th, 2004. It's available on Spotify and all over the place. The interstitial music is by Advance Bass, the amazing Owen Ashworth. My podcast art is by Sarah Beacon, Becan, former guest of the podcast as well. And is there anything else I need to tell you? Oh, I'm DC Pierson on Twitter, DeeCee Pierson on Instagram. And please rate and subscribe to the show. Leave a nice review. That is extremely helpful if in fact you do enjoy the show. And other than that, I will talk to you next week. Okay, bye-bye. I just ended that like a phone call. I don't know why. Force of habit, I guess. But talk to you next week. Bye.